Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time for a post-combine mock draft, believe it or not. So, let's see. We're going to go over the news, the rumors, what we saw on the field, some of the takeaways from the risers and the fallers, in terms of their draft stocks, and we're going to read some of the tea leaves from the media sessions of the players and of the coaches and the GMs of the league, and take all that in, I should say, inform you of whatever you may have missed, not seen, as well as help that to shape our post-combine mock draft as we get one step closer towards some sort of idea of what we might end up seeing on draft day. And then, of course, draft day will happen and it'll be completely different. But hey, we're trying. So I prepped a video ahead of time, but it's too out of date already, which was always the risk of doing that. But I went all the way, prepped it. I was just going to record it and let it sit and then finish prepping it. I didn't. I ended up editing it. I made a thumbnail for it and everything. But luckily, I am ahead of schedule in terms of collecting all of the data that I've collected over the last couple of days and getting that disseminated across multiple different pages and everything. So that's good. I took in a lot of information these past few days, and I'll continue to take in nuggets that get dropped over the coming weeks, days, and then we're going to be full swing into the smoke screen season after that, because then the big names from free agency have already been determined, and teams are going to be really honing in on what their draft path might be. And given what their draft path might be and what they want to happen, they're going to leak some stuff out to the press, and they're going to try to push narratives to push certain players up or down, and I think that that's already happening. It's Monday night right now, and I've literally spent all day working on this, shuttered away from a lot of the rumors that are going to be coming out of the combine immediately. I haven't seen any of the new mock drafts yet for today. I really look into enjoying those tonight, so I'm going to take a couple of hours off for the first time in forever. That to say, I certainly have missed some of the news today. Hopefully, nothing that would have reshaped this draft, though. At the end of the video, I'm going to show you another resource that you can find on the Discord server as well. So a little teaser for that. But I think that we need to get this draft started here with Tennessee. And I think that Tennessee has been doing everything that they can this offseason in order to try to drive the price of that number one pick up as high as they can. They said that they've been receiving phone calls for it, which, of course, you have. I mean, teams are going to do their due diligence, check things out. But at the end of the day, I don't know that the price is going to be enough for them to move off of it. And so, I don't know. They've moved on from Will Levis twice this last season. I just think that that's what they're going to do. So they're going to continue to move on, and they're going to draft Cam Ward here with the first pick of this mock draft. See if that's what happens. So let's address some information that we've gotten from 5 of the next 6 players here. Tedero McMillan's the only one that we don't need to really talk about here. So Travis Hunter. Teams have differing opinions on him. At least one team has a different opinion, that being Cleveland Browns. We'll get to that in a little bit. But my opinion, I think the consensus opinion is still going to be cornerback, full-time, wide receiver, half-time. But it is interesting to see. There is at least one team out there who thinks wide receiver, full-time, cornerback, part-time. So this is my breakdown of it. Would be cornerback, full-time. This is my expectation. And then he's going to work in the red zone. That's on average 3 snaps a game. Then he's going to work on third downs. That's on average 12 to 13 snaps a game. So that brings us to about an average of 15 snaps a game that he should be on the field on offense. And you figure not all of those are going to be passing plays. So on average, about 8 or 10 pass plays per game, routes that he will run per game. And that is a number that I came up with myself last week that I put into the video that I had prepared for this. And over the weekend, it was reported, and I don't remember who I heard this report from, but they were reported from an anonymous AFC scout that they expect the same thing that I expected, like that exact number, that 8 to 10 pass plays plays per game. I assume that they figured out the same way here, using the same numbers. You play Hunter on offense on critical downs only. So once again, third downs in the red zone. That's what that breaks down to. So, that's just a little bit. There are some differing opinions, though, out there in the league. It's not a sure thing that every team thinks Travis Hunter cornerback first. So that's kind of interesting. Abdul Carter, stress reaction in his right foot during medicals came up, Basically, that means that there are early signs of a stress fracture that is occurring. It's not a stress fracture yet. This is not a major injury. This isn't injury. This is not some sort of soft tissue injury. So immediately your concern is not that of, is he falling out of the first round or anything like that? We're definitely don't have to worry about that from what I know and can gather and could expect from that type of injury. On top of that, the early reporting was possible surgery. The more recent reporting is no surgery needed, no surgery suggested. I think just because it's the off season, like just take some time. Hopefully it'll heal on its own and you should be good. So the question is really though, stock up or stock down? Not stock up, but did the stock go down for Abdul Carter? And if so, how far down? And I'll start off by saying the worst case scenario I think would be that he's still a top 10 pick, just not a top, 5 pick, which he currently is. He's also the most likely player currently betting odds. I don't know if that's changed since that news, or maybe it has, but going into the weekend, he's the top player expected to go with the number one pick. The number one non-quarterback pick. And I think that was about a 60-40 type deal. I don't think it was a sure thing. I don't think it was quite 50-50 either. It seemed to lean in favor of Abdul Carter being the first non-quarterback taken off the board. I would say now, maybe that's flipped. Maybe, depending on exactly, how this whole thing plays out, though. Travis Hunter would be the favorite to be taken as the first non-quarterback, is all it is. And that is what we're going to end up doing in this draft, I believe. But I'm going ahead of myself. Mason Graham is the next guy up on this list here, 4th ranked on the board that you're looking at. It was not a surprise that he has short arms, so, anytime things are not a surprise, you don't want to count them against a player twice. You're not saying, oh my gosh, now I'm so concerned about him. He's got short arms. Oh my gee willikers. We knew this about him. Not concerned, nor was his weight a complete surprise. It's a non-issue. A lot of guys lose weight in order to do better in the athletic testing, and that's just a thing that happens at this time of the year. Even if he didn't lose weight, and that is just his normal plain weight that he weighed in at, it's perfectly fine. He's not too light or anything like that for the position. So at the end of the day, my stock has remained the same on Mason Graham. No change there. Ashton Genty's stock up or down here. Really, the conversation actually moves a little bit more to Omarion Hampton in this conversation. Conversations out there, reports that Omarion Hampton's number one running back on some teams' big boards or whatever. That's not the exact wording, and there's a reason for that. More so the wording is that there are some scouts out there who have Omarion Hampton ahead of Ashton Genty. And then you hear what I just said. And so I'm sure that's the case. I don't doubt that at all. I mean, there's varying opinions on a lot of players, and you'd be surprised sometimes, how different opinions are. But Omarion Hampton is a really, really good running back. Ashton Genty is not quite an elite prospect, depending on exactly how you weigh things, how you see things for him. And so if you're a little bit low on Ashton Genty and you're a little bit high on Omarion Hampton, I could easily see that crossing over, and I'm sure there are some scouts who have Omarion Hampton higher up than Ashton Genty. The question is are the majority of scouts on any given team also in agreement with that? Is that the loudest scout in the room that's going to make that draft? And then does that happen to be on one of the teams that's going to happen to draft a running back first? So a lot of things need to go right in order for Ashton Genty to not go first, I would say, in this draft. At the end of the day, Omarion Hampton, not stock down. Sure. Genty, not stock down or anything. His stock has not changed. Omarion Hampton, I do think, probably raised his stock in some people's views a little bit. Had a really good showing at the combine. And then Will Campbell's probably the big one here, 6th ranked prospect here, tackle Will Campbell. Came in with 32 and 5/8 inch arms. This is another one where this isn't a complete surprise. But it's not a death sentence either. Sub 33 inch arms, not greatest, can be overcome through great athletics. Also, sub 33 inch arms. Some people will say no team will ever draft a tackle with sub 33 inch arms. That's not correctly. In case you're not aware, 34 inch arms is really the mark that teams want to see. That's the old traditional mark where they're off players players are off teams' boards as a tackle if they don't have 34-inch arms. Opinions on that are a little bit more relaxed these days, as we've seen players with less than 34-inch arms succeed. We've seen players with less than 33-inch arms succeed. It's not the norm, it is a hindrance, and you do see it impact Will Campbell's game from time to time. But he's still probably the best offensive lineman. I'm getting ahead of myself. Just an example. Last year, Jordan Morgan, 32 and 7/8 inch arms, I should say, still got drafted as a tackle by the Green Bay Packers. They brought him into camp. He played right tackle, he played left tackle, he played right guard, he played left guard. They had him going everywhere as a rookie immediately. It was sink or swim. He did not swim. Is that because his arms were 1/8 of an inch too short to be good at a tackle? Probably not. They didn't help, but probably not the reason. I think they were asking a whole heck of a lot of him. We'll see where they start him this year. I mean, they might kick him back out, try him out at tackle again, see if that works or not to start off the offseason. We'll see what the future is for Jordan Morgan. Nonetheless, the team did draft him and originally really started him out trying as a tackle. So teams do still do that. Well, like I said, you need extremely rare athleticism. Will Campbell has that and the size and everything. He has a lot going for him in order to succeed at the tackle position as well. He's still probably the best overall offensive lineman in the class. Still probably a tackle for some teams, but maybe fewer teams now. So, it's just there are more teams that are going to have him. We don't know about that. Did his stock go up? Did his stock go down? I don't really think that we learned anything new. But for people like me, we did confirm that some teams will have him off of their boards as a tackle. It is sub 33. There's going to be teams that will probably auto-eliminate him because of that. That said, the value of guards has risen a lot over the past 2 years in the NFL. They received huge contracts last off-season, bigger than we've ever seen, for the guard position. We just saw Kansas City place a franchise tag on guard Trey Smith. Teams historically don't franchise tag the guard position because that means that they're going to have to pay him like a top 5 offensive lineman, not a top 5 offensive guard, a top 5 offensive tackle, essentially, is what that breaks down to. And so, if teams are now willing to pay a guard like they're willing to pay a tackle, I think that tells you a lot. That confirms what we've already been seeing, is that the value of guards has risen a lot. Here are some of the reasons why the guard position's value has risen in the last few years. The power run game, or just the run game in general, has been on the incline. We saw that come to fruition last year in its totality, probably, came out loud and screaming that the running back position is back. The running game is back in the NFL. Interior penetration, also on the defensive side of the ball, has been a focus for many years now. And so players have been now getting bred, to be disruptors along the inside of the defensive line rather than just those big stopgap kind of guys that historically you might see. And because of that, you are now seeing a lot more talent around the entirety of the NFL of guys who can penetrate from the inside of the defensive line, not just edge rushers, creating pressure on the quarterback. And so you need to counter that as an offense. Also, in terms of likely, what might help Will Campbell to get drafted is that the mentality of the best 5 offensive linemen is as high as it's ever been. I think teams are a little bit more flexible with where they're going to be able to mix and match their offensive line in order to get the best offensive line. Finally, like I said, there's a stigma that guards don't get drafted in the first round, much less in the top 10, and that's just verifiably false. You can go back and look at pretty much every draft, and they do. Same with even centers do. So, does the stock go up or down for Will Campbell ultimately? His arm length concerns were not a secret. I moved him down a spot in my rankings, or maybe I moved Jahdae Barron up a spot in my rankings. Maybe kind of a combination of both. I don't know. But let's get back to the draft here. Cleveland Browns are on the clock. And General Manager Andrew Berry stated that he believed that Travis Hunter is a receiver first, or believes Travis Hunter is a receiver first, corner second. So the question then would be on their board, if they're, well, it doesn't matter. The question is it him or is it Tedoroa McMillan as their wide receiver 1? I'm sure there are some people who would have Tet over Travis Hunter as a wide receiver. I don't. I have Hunter as my wide receiver 1, but I'm not as high up on Tet as some others are. There is, of course, the looming Myles Garrett situation here. It's a deep edge class. We don't have to go edge here. We're going to lean into a little bit of concern with Abdul Carter and that injury and whatnot. And we're just going to take Travis Hunter here. It's something that I was been pretty much doing anyways, but yeah. I'm going to take Travis Hunter here. It brings the New York Giants up onto the clock, and varying reports to varying degrees are out there that Shedeur is not the consensus number 2 quarterback. I mean, I call BS on that to an extent. Could be a smokescreen, very much so. Quarterback 2 and quarterback 3 are not about to get flipped by a guy throwing well in gym shorts. That's just bad process, in my opinion. Now, there are other things going on. There are interviews going on, of course, so that can heavily impact things ultimately. But I just Shedeur Sanders interviews well. He's fine with that. That being said, another reason that maybe something's getting a little bit closer coming out of this weekend, as that there are some rumblings that maybe Shedeur Sanders did not give it his all during some of the interviews with some teams. So not all of them had that complaint, but some of them might have. And I think that could be coming from an area of overconfidence from Shedeur Sanders. A couple weeks ago, a pundit had Shedeur Sanders going at pick 6 to the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, some people have mocked him even later than that, but he happened to see that mock draft, and he didn't like that, and he said there's no way that's happening. I'm going top 3, whatever. Lock to go top 3 or something. Maybe it was his response even. And his confidence in that could be showing in some of his preparation and some of his attitude. For instance, if he interviewed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Maybe he didn't give it his all. I don't think that he would have given off any bad character concerns. Just like, are you even trying, kid? That kind of situation. It definitely is a possibility. At the end of the day, do I believe that his stock went up or down? I really don't think that it's changed too much. But the New York Giants are going to go best player available here in this mock draft. I've spoken about this at length in some mock drafts that I've done, but I will repeat it. Going the route of getting a veteran quarterback and matching that up, pairing that up with one of these 2nd to 3rd, maybe even early 4th round, whatever the NFL decides exactly on these quarterbacks. Quarterbacks in this year's draft class, I think it's as enticing as it's ever been. I think that there is evidence to suggest that teams are very heavily looking into that type of scenario, including reports surrounding the Giants and their interest in getting both a veteran and that not taking them out of getting a quarterback in the draft as well. That being said, once again, we're going to go best player available. It's going to be Abdul Carter here too for the New York Giants, as we are going to explore something that I've thought, been exploring for some time here, that Shedeur Sanders maybe isn't a lock in the top 3. Doesn't mean he's not top 6, top 10 lock. I don't know. New England's up on the clock next, and up on the podium, head coach Mike Vrabel spoke about getting guys with big catch radiuses along the perimeter for Drake May to succeed, in order for Drake May to succeed. And he also talked about the importance along the trenches, of course, offense, defensive line. Nonetheless, those comments about wide receiver really seem to match one guy here the most. Tetairoa McMillan going to New England at 4. It's his ceiling probably. Maybe New York is the ceiling there. But I really like the match. I think that it puts everybody else in line there nicely to hopefully help their careers as well. Everybody's career there. So it's a good fit. They're going to invest in the offensive line in the offseason. And they can still do that in the draft as well more. But Tetairoa McMillan at the top, like I said, we're going to take some of these things that we're hearing and apply them to the draft. So that's something that we heard. That brings us on to Jacksonville. And in general, we heard that they'd like to continue to help Trevor Lawrence to succeed with additions to the receiving room. So if Tetairoa McMillan had been available here, maybe that's a route we could have gone. And maybe along the offensive line. Will Campbell, Armand Membu could be available. It could be the picks here. There is a deep offensive line class, as you'll kind of gather throughout the process of this mock draft here, but a lot of talent between the 2nd to 4th round kind of talent for the offensive line. We're going to go best player available. We're going to draft Mason Graham here to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know we do that a lot. It's a good fit. Makes a lot of sense. Maybe he's off the board before this, but if he's available here, it's kind of tough to pass him up depending on who else is available. Las Vegas Raiders are up next. Is it Shedeur Sanders? I've gone Ashton Jeanty here plenty of times. My 2.0 mock draft, which will be coming out next week, by the way, probably not going to do what I'm about to do. So we're going to switch it up here. We're going to take my new number 5 prospect, previous number 6 prospect, in Jahdae Barron here from Texas, cornerback, nickelback, do-it-aller, safety, a little bit of linebacker. He can do it all. Look, my guy Jade, he shut up the haters at the combine. He ran a 4.39 40-yard dash. There were rumors abound that he wasn't incredibly athletic, but there's also now rumors abound that he is a lot of scouts' favorite defensive back. The question is, how high will the NFL actually draft him? There are several players that we could put in some sort of a similar bucket, right, as Jade Barron, or Jade Barron's in their bucket. They came first, that have been drafted over the past several years. We look back at when they've been drafted. Trent McDuffie, picked 21 in the draft, first round, of course. Daxton Hill, picked 31 in the draft, same draft, picked 31. Cooper DeJean last year, picked 40th overall. And then a couple years ago, Brian Branch, picked 45th overall. I think that's over the last 3 years of draft. All those players are in the same bucket. You know, the NFL keeps wanting to ignore these guys, but then you look at some of those guys and what they've meant to their teams already in the case of Cooper DeJean, and maybe they'll stop ignoring them higher up in the draft. Pick 6 might be a little rich, but it's that kind of draft. Let's get on to the next pick here. Head coach Aaron Glenn of the New York Jets is up on the podium, and he said that speed is what everyone is looking for at the quarterback position, notably if that quarterback is under 6 feet tall, which, yeah, that makes some sense. Good football players and other locker room types of intangibles overrule height, weight, speed, etc., he said. And I mentioned that second comment. The first comment probably doesn't matter here, except for the fact that I guess it does matter because we're not going to be drafting Shedeur Sanders. Speed is what everyone's looking for at quarterback. Not quite Shedeur Sanders there. That's not Shedeur Sanders. So the reason I have the second comment then is because that opens the door for a Will Campbell type, a guy who's a leader through and through, incredibly knowledgeable, high IQ. It's some of the physical things that might limit his game, and offensive line is a need for the New York Jets. A little bit more general info for that I gathered from their podium interviews. They're open to moving up or down from pick 7, so I will look to move them up or down in some mock drafts as we go. One thing that I think is important for the public to understand is that once we get to pick 4 in this draft, it's a free-for-all. There are maybe 4, locked in top 5 picks in this draft, maybe. I think that we need to go into this draft mindset, understanding that what we think of positional value has meant over the past decade needs to be kind of thrown out the window here. Ignore all that type of stuff. So part of that logic is that who do teams deem it's worth trading up for? So this is where I was kind of thinking about all this when I'm trying to get the Jets moved down up on the board. So who do teams deem is worth trading up for? When you have this hobgodge of guys who aren't quite top-tier talents, you kind of might as well let the board unfold in front of you a little bit more before you're moving up, or let somebody drop, which at this point in the draft, we're not deep enough into the draft for players to have dropped far enough for teams to have deemed we got to get up there and get this guy now. So you're going to want to let the board kind of play out in front of you because it is such a wide diversity of opinions and not the top-end talent, but this wide breadth of second, third tier talent in this class is really good. And I just think that leads to teams, once again, just kind of figuring things out. So, on to the pick here for the New York Jets. Obviously, looking offensive line here, talked about Will Campbell. If you're specifically looking for a tackle prospect, however, this high up in the draft, and there is no room in the foreseeable future in your guard room, maybe you want to play it a little bit safe and go with Armand Membu instead of Will Campbell. Now, when we look at the New York Jets, guard Elijah Vera Tucker has a club option coming up in 2025. He's 26 years old. I think that the team ends up signing him, extending him to a long-term contract before they even get there over the next season, I would assume. And at guard, John Simpson's 28 years old, and he's under contract for 1 more year, but after that, there would be a guard opening. But I said, screw it. We're going to go with Armand Membu here instead, and I will explain the pick. If you believe that he has a better shot at filling in at tackle for you, then you can certainly re-sign John Simpson after the 2025 season once you have confidence in Armand Membu as a tackle. However, Armand Membu is also flexible, so if you don't like him at tackle, you don't like what you're seeing, you can let John Simpson go, and you kick Armand Membu onto the inside of your offensive line, and you figure out the right tackle then at that point in time. Maybe that answer could be found later on in this draft. You can take another offensive lineman. There's some nice, deep, like I said, second to fourth round. Get a guy in there as well in case things don't work out perfectly. To be clear, Armand Membou has sub 34-inch arms. He does not have the long arms that you necessarily want from an offensive tackle, and some people do have him as a guard. We've talked about tackles and arm length and stuff enough. Let's move on to the the Panthers draft pick. And I note that this has been common, but we are going to go with Jalen Walker. Now, what's not been common is necessarily the fact that he is now number 20 on my draft board. I'm turning a new tune to Jalen Walker. I am getting convinced of his draft stock and where teams seem to think, how highly they seem to think of Jalen Walker. I've been able to take into account character positives and negatives. I kind of held off on that a little bit, even for guys who I knew that, like, I think the character's supposed to be good. And those are really important for me in my rankings, and they're really important around the NFL and in their rankings. Obviously, sometimes, players do things that are bad, but they're also just such a good player that the NFL kind of ignores it. That happens, unfortunately. That happens in every workforce, by the way. But, a lot of this community seems to ignore NFL character when it comes to the grading of prospects. It's just the athletics, it's just the size, it's just the production. The character has a lot also that weighs in, and different teams weigh it more or less than others. Some teams are willing to take risks more than other teams with character. But Jalen Walker shot up my rankings for a reason here. We talk about character for a reason. The dude is very well-spoken. He loves being the chess piece. This isn't necessarily a character right here, but he loves being that chess piece, and something that's really good for him in that chess piece role, which specifically was something I actually liked about him, is that and just, I guess I was a little concerned, do teams see it the same way? Because you kept hearing Jalen Walker, edge rusher. I don't really like Jalen Walker, the edge rusher. I like Jalen Walker, the chess piece, who can run off the edge, as well as do everything else. He can play in the nickel, that star, Sam role, whatever you want to call it. And he said that teams that he's been talking with are interested in using him as that kind of chess piece. So I like that for him. I like that for his future. I like that the NFL is being open to that. And he's wicked smart, man. I think that he has a future as a coach, but he could also have a future in the media if he decides that that's the route that he would like to go instead. Whichever he wants for himself after he's done with football, I'm pretty sure he will succeed at it very highly. So I think very highly of the young man, as you can tell. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, though. That's, all great character stuff. There are some physical concerns for him. He's really short. He's really light. He has short arms. He's really undersized. So probably good that you're going to be moving him around, getting him a little bit, off guy so he can use his smarts, his speed, etc. To his advantage a little bit better. Jalen Walker, great piece to build a defense around. Carolina dismantled this defense. They're going to start rebuilding it. Let's build it around Jalen Walker. I'm in for it. I love it. He is my, like I said, 20th ranked prospect. I still don't have it as top 10, but definitely on board with him now. New Orleans Saints are up on the clock next. Last year at pick 8, Atlanta shocked the world, and this year at pick 9, New Orleans is going to shock the world. How are they going to do that? Look, if you're in it for the quarterback after Derek Carr in this year's draft, and you're concerned that Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe won't make it to your second round pick, which based on some rumors going around and stuff, that's seems like a possibility. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. But if that's all the case and Shadeur's still here, Shadur Sanders should work for you. So, we're going to have New Orleans Saints sneaking up, taking Shadur Sanders here at pick 9, the one that nobody mocked. And with that, we got to see Ben Johnson up at the podium at the Combine. He talked about it, meaning the offensive line here, not just being the best 5, but being the best 6, 7, 8, 9. He even said, because he said this twice, 10. He got all the way up to 10. The guys that will be getting significant snaps throughout the season because injuries happen. He called it the bullpen, saying that the bullpen of the offensive line is also incredibly important. So for him, it's not just best 5, it's best 10 is what he wants. Yeah, you talk about a guy who respects, wants, likes having a great offensive line. Obviously, Ben Johnson is that man. So we're right back where we started the offseason for Chicago. We're going to go with Will Campbell. I believe it's my mock draft 1.0. I have Will Campbell going to Chicago here. Makes a lot of sense. I think it's a really nice pick for them as well. So that's what we're back to. and that's bring San Francisco up onto the board. Reports are that San Francisco is the leading destination for defensive linemen in free agency. I was thinking that Shamar Stewart could be a nice fit here, could be going up this high in the draft. Also, Mykel Williams could be an option here. Consensus is that Jihad Campbell will be a top 20 pick. He is now my 12th ranked prospect, another big-time climber. My number 1 ranked linebacker. He wasn't even number 1 ranked linebacker coming into the weekend, or at least shortly before the weekend. And I do see the potential that he'll end up being a top 10 prospect on my board by the time that we get to draft day. In fact, I am of the strong belief that the secret is out, and that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers love this guy, and they will draft him if he's available at their pick, which is probably not the kind of news that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers want out there. But I think that is going to be the biggest unkept secret of this draft offseason. I expect to see smoke screens to say otherwise, because they're going to be scrambling so that teams aren't trying to trade ahead of him if he is going to make it to them. Kind of none of that matters in this scenario here. First of all, talks about Jihad Campbell. Incredibly impressed. Everything that I said about Jalen Walker essentially is a lot of what I wrote about Jihad Campbell. Really impressive dude. He's going to go here at pick 11 to the San Francisco 49ers. They've got a need there, and so that is what we do. And that will bring the Dallas Cowboys up onto the clock next. And we're going to go back to the basics here. Last year, I mocked Bo Nix to the Broncos, and all but like 1 or 2 mock drafts were really, I was just like, okay, we'll try something differently here. But even in those mock drafts, I think I basically just had him trade up for a different quarterback, JJ, or trade down and still take Bo Nix. But almost every time I figured there's no way that they're going to be able to trade back and trust it. They're going to stick and pick. That was the clear and obvious thing for them to do at pick 12. I felt like sometimes picks just line up like that. Ashton Jeanty is not as sure of a pick here for the Dallas Cowboys, but I'm sure you knew that's what we were going when I said back to the basics here. It's a very, very strong candidate if he's available at pick 12 for the Cowboys, is my belief, and I think most people's belief, and it just makes sense. That's going to bring us on to Miami, and I still have Kelvin Banks as a top 10 guy on my big board. The scheme fit is absolutely fantastic here for Miami. I just struggled to get past. This is very similar to the Bo Nix type thing, the Ashton Jeanty thing. I struggled to get past this without Kelvin Banks going to one of these teams, pick 11 or pick 13 here. This brings us on to pick 14. The Indianapolis Colts are up onto the board. And this is another Jihad Campbell destination, by the way. I think that we're going to go back to the basics here as well, just kind of things lining up. Tyler Warren, my number 8 ranked prospect, going to Indianapolis. It just makes sense, and it lines up fairly well. We'll see. I mean, Tyler Warren, like I said, it's a free-for-all in this year's draft, so who knows how high he could go. Let's bring the Atlanta Falcons up on the clock, and things that came out about them is that they filled up all of their interviews at the Combine with defensive players. So obviously there's a huge focus on defense for the Atlanta Falcons. Now teams draft players that they don't interview at the Combine, don't interview throughout the entire process, don't even look at sometimes. Teams do that. Green Bay Packers are a team that notoriously, at least used to do that a lot. And so sometimes teams just know what they like, and if that player's there, they're going to grab them. Offensive side, defensive side, ball doesn't matter. So obviously, a guy like Luther Burden, maybe they love him. They don't need to talk to him. They know, and they feel comfortable with it. And if he's there, they're going to grab him. I mean, that's always possible. But we're going to look at 3 defensive guys here. They need help on that edge position. We got 3 edge prospects that could get taken here. Mykel Williams, Shamar Stewart, Mike Green. Mike Green, we're going to eliminate him. Potential baggage issues there. We'll talk about that more shortly. Mykel Williams, number 34 on my big board. I came away with by far the best physical upside for the edge position. He had a perfect score on my scale. He is a physical specimen, even more so than Shamar Stewart, who gets all the love for being a physical specimen because just look at the guy. But Shamar Stewart, number 31 on my big board. A couple spots ahead of Mykel Williams. Probably a better athlete than Mykel Williams, though I can't say that for sure. And to be honest, I might end up putting Mykel Williams up ahead of Shamar Stewart. It seems to be pretty reliable that he really wasn't playing. That's another thing that came out. I mean, he said he's playing at 60%. 70 was the first number. So he's saying that he's playing at like 70% or less throughout the entirety of the season. And if that's what he was playing at. I went back, I looked at the 2023 tape before the draft, actually, before the combine, actually, and it was more impressive. And then, he's getting older and everything. And there's a lot to really like about Michael Williams. So that's the route that we're going to go here for Atlanta. And I will say, if you're going to watch some tape on him or something, go to 2023. I tend to lean towards, I like to use the most recent tape on guys, and there's nothing wrong with looking at both. But it seems like 2023 just actually might be more representative of what you're going to get. And there's still some room to grow there, but great tools to work with. As we bring Arizona up onto the clock, head coach Jonathan Gannon said that he very much wants to acquire, I have that in all caps, guys who can disrupt the quarterback. Obviously, mostly talking about edge rushers, but also interior penetrators. Just obviously he recognizes that that's an area of need for improvement. This is a good NFL draft. They're in a nice spot here with how the board is shaken to get one if they like these guys. So, of course, we've got Shamar Stewart and Mike Green then, who I have the Arizona Cardinals in this situation arguing between. Shamar Stewart, once again, my 31st ranked prospect. Mike Green, 10th ranked prospect. Another thing about Shamar Stewart is that he has great leadership qualities. He's got a very rare size and speed combo that is quite rare. There's kind of maybe two guys in this draft with it, but you don't see it all the time. Production profile, not great, but you combine all the tools that he has along with the fact that he's really outgoing, great locker room guy, great leadership guy, and he's probably going to go quite highly in the draft. And then you've got Mike Green, and he may not be the same type of outspoken leader as Shamar Stewart, but he certainly has some of those qualities as well. I thought that he handled his podium session with a lot of poise and composure, and those are very important words for what we're about to get into. So, if you're not aware, Mike Green has 2 essay allegations in his past. One was in high school, one was at college level. He sat there throughout the media session, and he answered the questions, and the media was hammering him with question after question after question, and he could have done a lot of things. He could have dodged the questions. He could have redirected the questions. He could have gotten angry about it, frustrated with them. He could have said, I already answered that any number of times, because a lot of the questions were very similar. He could have said, I won't take questions about that, and it would have been understandable at least. Instead, he sat there and he answered practically the same question over and over again, and he went into thorough detail with his answers and any nuances that, came up in the new questions about it. He picked up on those nuances and responded in kind to that slight variation of the same question. And so I was left actually impressed with that. Some people say he's a little bit vague. Well, I mean, to some extent, yeah, of course, he's a little bit vague, but I thought he got pretty specific into it. He wasn't saying essay, he was just saying the allegations and everything, and nobody was questioning him specifically with what the allegations were until finally a reporter asked him, what specific allegations, what are those allegations? They didn't know. But I thought that was a good question because you want to see what his response is, and he was front forward. He's like, the essay, it said it, essay, accusations against me, blah, blah, blah. So, incredibly open about it. I appreciate it. It doesn't mean he's innocent. He also may not be guilty. So personally, I don't think that it's fair to say where there's smoke, there's fire, because that's just not always true. Teams will do their due diligence. And for me, until I see the fire, which would be him falling in mock drafts with very well-connected people to the NFL, leaks of major concerns coming from really good sources, and in combination that with the mock draft stuff, it's going to take, true good sources saying this is an issue. This is not something that can be swept under the rug. Teams are concerned about it. It's going to impact his draft stock. For me to actually have an impact his draft stock, and it just hasn't gotten there yet. In fact, these have been out and available and known for some time, since before the combine, and some major mockers were still putting them up in top 10 and everything while they're dropping James Pierce out of the first even completely. So I'm going to continue to, once again, not really ding him for this, but it is baggage. It is potential baggage that we might have to ding him a little bit for at times. I mean, I'll put him in the top 10 sometimes. I won't other times. In this case, we are going to go with Shamar Stewart. We are just going to take the safer route with a guy who once again, there's a lot to like about. I don't. There's issues with Mike Green, obviously, but there might not be, right? So, that's up to the teams to figure out. Cincinnati Bengals. Hold up. One thing before we get to Cincinnati Bengals. If you made it this far in the video, please drop a like. It really does help. You can find my top 65 big board available up on the website and on the Discord server, and that gets updated semi-regularly. Both of those links can be found down in the description. Also, on the Discord server are all of my player evaluations, including many strengths, weaknesses, and other notes for hundreds of prospects. So please, I put a lot of effort into it. I don't know. Nobody could look into it and see it, and I'm still okay with it, but I would rather people saw my work. So go check those out if those are things that you are interested in, or something that you can pull up on draft day as well, just to see this is the type of player that I'm getting. These are their strengths. These are their weaknesses. This is a little bit of their history, maybe. Sometimes I don't get a whole lot into the history, but interesting things I do like to note down in there. So, there you go. Thank you very much for any and all support. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you're interested in this stuff. Let's move on to Cincinnati Bengals. Unless you believe that a running back is on the table for the Bengals in the first round, then nothing that I wrote about what Zach Taylor said in this press conference would be valid here. So, I don't think that they're going to go running back. In fact, to the opposite, he really talked about liking his running back as a starting running back. Still going to want to add into the room, but not in the first round. So, Cincinnati has shied away from players with character concerns in the past, so Mike Green is 100% a possibility here, almost regardless of what news comes out on Mike Green, unless it's incredibly damning information. But as of now, there is no outstanding ongoing investigations on Mike Green that we are aware of outside of teams doing their own homework. Of course, those are, they're investigating it. Will Johnson would make a lot of sense here if they wanted to avoid any kind of character concerns. That comes from the fact that, maybe they do want to avoid character concerns because just last year they drafted Jermaine Burton higher than any team was willing to take him because of character concerns, and it has not gone well up to date, or at least through the first season. So that's fresh, that's a wound. So I'm going to go with something a little bit more fun and unique here, just to avoid that whole situation. This guy had one of the better combines of anyone. It was anticipated that he would have a very good combine. Everybody knew that, but I think it was even better than anybody could have imagined. I moved him up to my safety number 1, but that's still pending re-review of the tape because I didn't originally have him at safety number 1, but we'll get back to that. It's going to be Nick Manwari, and when I say we'll get back to that, I don't mean today. I'll get back to that at some point, and I'll make sure that I do like him better than the other 2 safeties that I still think highly of as well. But Nick Manwari, another one of those Shamar Stewarts with better production, at a different position, but a very, very good prospect for Cincinnati here to take. And I only have them interested in a safety if it's going to be a top-end safety, so that's where they're kind of playing the draft board to their advantage, saying this is a need, he's available, we're going to go for it. We're going to take advantage of the deep draft in other positions that we have some need for. Seattle Seahawks are up onto the board next, and by the way, every team from pick 14 through pick 20 is a potential landing spot for Jihad Campbell, so I agree with what I've heard, that Jihad Campbell's not going to make it out of the top 20. I don't think I mentioned that in this video, but I might have. I heard that from a source. I agree with it. Jihad Campbell's not making it out of the top 20 in this draft. General Manager John Schneider, up at the podium, was an absolute shock when he was asked a question about, quote-unquote, where things stand between them and DK Metcalf. It felt completely authentic to me. He wasn't putting on a show, from what I could tell. I don't think there's nothing going on there. I don't believe that there's any actual smoke on that front. There's no fire. There's no smoke. It's just people making shit up. That's all that it is. So if you hear any of that DK Metcalf stuff, until you hear more about it from different sources, just ignore it. We'll be taking a guy here who did not silence the critics, which I think they would have preferred to silence the critics, but they just didn't, and they didn't do a whole lot. I don't believe that his stock is falling in most NFL circles, but in some NFL circles, his stock may have fallen. I felt a lot of people, it looked like the general consensus was starting to feel like Will Johnson, right there, Will Johnson, 14th on this draft board, was a top 20 prospect, whereas kind of coming into the season, a lot of expectations were top 10, top 5 kind of cornerback prospect. But we were moving towards that, and I don't think that we really learned anything new about Will Johnson. He comes in with short arms. I'd heard rumblings about that myself, so if I hear things, and scouts for teams surely must know about these things. So the short arms were a concern on him, and the reason that matters for him, more so than even a guy like Jahdae Barron, is because of the styles of play. They play two different games, and Will Johnson's the kind of guy who you're going to ask to like go and just shut down a guy, press man corner style for a whole game. Short arms can impact that, can make that a lot harder to do. So maybe his stock fell for some who just didn't see that on tape, didn't believe any of the rumblings about short arms. We all see things on tape. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes we don't see things on tape, and we should have. So I think we're still at the fact that he's a top 20 prospect is what I'm saying. There's still a lot to like about Will Johnson. He's a good character guy as well and all that too. So Seattle's going to start to build a secondary that they can build their hat on. They're already starting to build that front seven here, so that defense is starting to round into shape with Tampa Bay coming up onto the board next. Unfortunately for Tampa Bay, Jihad Campbell is not available, so it's time to move on to Plan B. Head coach Todd Bowles said that the team's draft's interests are edge rushers, corners, inside linebackers, and wide receivers. In that order is what he said. I wrote that down. And there's actually a pause. He said edge rushers, corners, inside linebackers, and wide receivers. So he thought about it. He gave us a nice, honest answer. Thank you. Mike Green versus James Pierce here. We already knew that edge rusher was a need here. He's just assured us that the team feels the same way. For James Pierce, I went into his media session really wanting to wipe away his character concerns and say that he's a definite top 10 prospect. Initially, I wrote that I had no quote-unquote specific tangible concerns, and I was using that wording specifically because I did want to be able to say that it's not that I didn't have any concerns. There was just nothing specifically being said or about his demeanor or anything that like was giving me a major concern. You know, there was some underlying concern. But then that's maybe 5 minutes in. I write that 4 minutes in or something. My initial kind of thing, and then they start to get more and more questions through, and it became clear to me like when you really listen to his answers, it becomes clear that the league, what the league specifically is concerned about on this dude. And there weren't specifics about what character concerns teams had, really, that I heard for the rumblings prior to the Combine, but it has come out since then, at least in more volume, louder noise, more like, yeah, we're really concerned about this. Since then, and it matches exactly up with what I gathered from what he was saying. So he is not a student of the game. And my biggest piece of evidence is that he said that he didn't have anyone's game that he modeled his game after. So in the NFL, I'd never heard a player like not come up with a name here. I mean, team players watch film on guys that are most specifically similar to their gameplay style, their physical stature, etc., in order to learn things that those players did to succeed. So they watch, the best of the best in the NFL, current, historical, whatever the case may be. And that's their answer for these. It's like, yeah, I watch tape on this guy. I love the way he does this. I try to emulate my game after that, try to take some of that away and add it into my game. That's how these guys get better. That's how they learn. A big part of it, the students of the games at least. And there's none of that. He can't even fake a name. I mean, pretty bad in my opinion. So you're just out there freestyling it, and that does seem to be the case. So I came away not even knowing if he liked football. I feel like he's just a highly athletic guy who's been put in a nice position where he can make a lot of money in life, and that's it for him, and that's okay. But if I'm somebody and I'm drafting you, I'd rather take the guys who are trying to perfect their game, trying to get better, not a guy who I think might be out of the NFL within several years, isn't a professional. I think that's the heart of it, is that he just doesn't seem to be a professional at all. So the whispers on this dude are getting louder and louder. I heard that he may even slip out of day 2, slip into the 4th round or beyond. And I get it, but I do think that somebody's going to take a shot on his athletic upside on day 2. He is now my 56th ranked prospect, so he has dropped a lot in my rankings. That's about the spot where I start to say, gosh, that's up. If he can become a professional, if he comes in here and he starts to take this thing seriously, I could get a guy who should have gone top 10 here late second round, it starts to get enticing, but there's obviously risk to that as well. But I don't want to take that risk in the first round. I'll take that in the second round at some point, I guess. Maybe third round. So that being said, we're going to go with Mike Green here to Tampa Bay. Just trying to get you guys informed on some of these things. That's going to bring us on to the Denver Broncos. So with that, another need here is on the nose tackle in the interior of their defense. Kenneth Grant is kind of that guy at this point in the draft. His strength has been a point of contention, as it appears it's good on run plays, but not so much when he tries to rush the passer. He had a very poor showing on the bench with 22 bench reps, so that did not clear up any of those concerns. He's still my 16th ranked prospect, however. It's unfortunate that a hamstring strain did not allow him to show off more at the combine. That was something that was found in the medicals, so then he didn't do the athletic testing. He was able to do the bench because, it's a hamstring. So he doesn't come off as a big-time leader. Got to see him, up at the podium. He seems to be more of a go-with-the-flow type of guy, and once again, that's perfectly fine. It's just something that he doesn't have. He is not the big-time leader type from what I could gather from his interviews. But he does clearly know ball, and he's got a big smile. So we're going to lock it in. We're going to take Kenneth Grant here for the Denver Broncos on to pick 21 for Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh would like to bring Justin Fields back for the right price. That's what the current rumors are. But on top of that, the league also apparently seems to be very interested in getting Justin Fields in free agency. Nothing's happened yet with Pittsburgh and Justin Fields, and it seems like Justin Fields' agent is pushing for him to test free agency because they're getting a lot of interest from teams. And when you got a team who's wanting to bring you in for the right price, that's probably not the going price on the market. So that, would not be good for Pittsburgh. In which case, is Jalen Milroe someone that they would be interested in? He's, to me, probably more similar to Justin Fields than any of the other options that we would think of right here. Or maybe in the second round you would want to get him, but can you trust that he's going to drop to you at pick 42 or whatever in the second round, or pick nearly 60, 50 something in the second round? Maybe you could trade back from this spot, put yourself in a better position in order to move up in the second round, or take him, if you move back into the early second round or something, take him with that pick. A lot of options here, a lot of ways to play this, so let's just open up the phone lines, see if we get any bites. And I think that the target here that's left on the board, most likely to maybe garner some interest to jump up, would be for Omarion Hampton. So, Los Angeles Chargers, a team who needs a running back, wants a running back. Definitely reasons that a team could say, ooh, I think that he's going to take Omarion Hampton. But then I look down on the board. I'm like, well, what team is really interested in a running back here? And the only one that I could come up with was the Minnesota Vikings. This is an interesting one. So Pittsburgh's going to send picks 21, 122, 163, a future fifth, going to get a future fourth in return, and 97. So basically it's like two trades in one. We're going to trade 24 up to 21, give you 97, but that's too much value. So we're going to get 122, 163 back. The reasoning for this is that Minnesota needs multiple picks. You see their draft value. They want more than 4 picks in this draft, probably. I assume so. So this allows them to move up while also increasing their pick count. It's, you're losing that 97th pick, but you're getting 122, 163 back. Is kind of what it is. And then, next year you're giving up a little bit of that capital with that 4th, 5th, kind of cleaning up some of the dirtiness of this trade. If you're going to move up, that's just the way that you do it if you're Minnesota, I feel. So I just kind of thought that was a fun trade, the only trade I could really kind of figure out here anyways, and so went through with it. And then, after making it, I looked at my notes from the press conference, and I do have some notes from Kevin O'Connell, the head coach, and from Kwesi Mansa, I think is how you pronounce it, general manager. So Kevin O'Connell likes the versatility of the offensive line class this year, and this was another situation where it really felt like he was specifically calling out a specific player as he was describing something here. And I heard Gray Zabel while he was talking. He also said it's a deep draft class in his opinion along the offensive line. Not the only one to talk about that, as I have already brought up in this video. Kwesi said really good running back draft class. Bring that up. I think we're going to hear that again. We heard it a lot. It's a really good draft class, running back draft class, and everybody agrees on that. So, we've got some conflicting information here. We could take this any which way, really. I have Gray Zabel one spot higher than Omarion Hampton on my big board. I was coming up here to grab Omarion Hampton. That was a plan, and then I saw my notes for it, and I was like, oh, Christ. So I think the Packers would be in on Gray Zabel at their draft pick, quite possibly. So the Vikings could also feel like, hey, maybe they're, jabbing the Green Bay Packers a little bit by trading up ahead of them, and teams just trade ahead of the Packers all the time and take guys that they think the Packers are going to take. So, hurt a team that's in your own division while you get a guy that you like a lot could make a lot of sense. Gray Zabel had one of the best combines of anyone, making a very strong argument to go in the first round. He'll be the heir apparent here in Minnesota to their center, and then he'll fill in at guard to start his career with Minnesota. So I said that weird. Gray Zabel start his career at guard for Minnesota as the heir apparent at center, just like Philadelphia did with their center situation, except it's going to be more so money reasons, I believe, that we're going to be moving on from our center here in Minnesota. Whatever the case, Minnesota, Gray Zabel. I switched things up on myself post-trade, and so that is the case. Green Bay, the Los Angeles Chargers are up on the board. Boy, it's been a long day, and this is getting long here. So Los Angeles Chargers, Kenneth Grant is gone, but I did feel like Jim Harbaugh had a moment where he almost slipped up and said Kenneth Grant's name as someone who he would love to reunite with Ben Herbert. Ben was on Jim's staff in Michigan as a strength and conditioning coach, so he worked with those Michigan guys already. I don't think that Jim expects Mason Graham to be there for their pick, and if anyone could benefit the most from an excellent strength and conditioning coach, it's got to be Kenneth Grant. So, look for that to be the pick if he's available here. And, somebody else that they don't like even more than that isn't available. Maybe they could jump over Denver if they suspect, the board's falling in such a way that Denver's going to be taking Kenneth Grant. Like, okay, we'll jump them. I think that Tampa Bay would be open to that as well. So, another thing to maybe keep an eye out for on draft day. I just highlighted Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's statement about the running back class. And as I said, he's far from the only one to talk about the strength of this draft class. And a very strong position in a draft class can have the opposite effect of a lot of them going early, and instead it can push players back. And it's like teams are starting to kind of play a little bit of chicken with themselves of who's going to take the running backs first, who's going to start the run on running backs. And then that pushes players back. Think of like the draft class with A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf. Some other draft classes that guys go much, much earlier, I believe at least. They don't. I think because of those draft classes being really strong at wide receiver. So I'm going to do just that here with the running backs. The Chargers need a lot of help along their front seven on defensive line. It's also deep along the defensive side of the ball, but they need more than one guy there as well. So we're going to go with Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan's draft stock changed at all over the past week? I don't think so. He's my 13th ranked prospect at this point in time. That brings the Green Bay Packers up onto the board, and look, this is a regime that likes their athletic freaks. Where just a few years ago, it was like the big thing of if a guy doesn't have an RAS score of like 9.9 or higher, the Green Bay Packers aren't going to be interested, at least early on in the draft. Originally, I was parlaying that statement about them being only interested in athletic freaks into a wide receiver pick for them, Matthew Golden. But then I remembered, hey, there's this guy named Maxwell Harrison who might have out-athleted Matthew Golden himself, and he fills a slightly greater need for the Green Bay Packers. News about it looks like we already knew that the team and Jair Alexander were probably going to be splitting ways, and for the most part, that's still not a for sure thing. But it seems like we're another step closer. Heck, by the time that this video's come out, maybe something's happened. It feels like that's more of a sure thing than it was even just a week ago when a lot of people thought it was a for sure thing, and it's still not a for sure thing. But even with Jair Alexander on the team, cornerback is still a need for them. So either way, they could go cornerback here. Harrison has my highest athletic rank at the position for the cornerback position, and the unofficial RAS score on him was 9.68, which backs that up. Maxwell Harrison is my 25th ranked prospect. I've been a little bit up and down on him around prospect 30, but I think we've kind of going to lock him in up there unless I really see something next time I watch him that I don't like. That's going to bring Pittsburgh back up onto the clock after they traded back. And it's possible that the fear of a quarterback getting taken, someone trading up into the first round, etc., begins with this pick originally at 24 with Minnesota Vikings because of that draft capital that we talked about. They're a team that if somebody wants to move into the first round for a quarterback, that's the first one that you're calling and saying, hey, yeah, I see you only got 4 picks. You want a couple more? And moving up and getting your guy. So there's that. Then just a couple picks later, pick 26, Los Angeles Rams. Yes, they're bringing Matt Stafford back, but obviously they are starting to look into the future. They're kind of in between worlds right now, I would say, in terms of what they're trying to do. They're still keeping it together to try and win a championship, but also they have been, and they will continue to rebuild something strong for into the future for somebody to come into and immediately be a Super Bowl contender again is the hope. So this was not the year to try to move on at quarterback. I think they know that. They were just trying to see what, with such a weak quarterback draft class and everything, what was the market? You got to test those things out. But regardless, I don't think that makes them not in play to draft a quarterback at some point in this draft. And this could be the first time where maybe they would draft one at pick 26. Maybe other teams could think that they would try to draft one. All the more reason to have to trade up or whatever, take a quarterback before draft pick 26, by 24. So the most recent word that I've been seeing is that, and actually, conflicting reports. I did, just before recording, finally look at all the notifications from today and saw a report about Jackson Dart now being a top 15 draft pick after the combine, which I don't believe it. But it seems like most teams still have Milroe as their number 3 quarterback. I more so, instead of like those clickbait kind of titles, I trust the guys who were in Indianapolis and were staying out late at the bar scene and talking to scouts that they've been talking to for the past 20 years and gathering information from all of those guys and then letting me know in a nice article that they write up. So I trust those a little bit more than like the big CBS push notification article that's taken some rumor that's going around and just pushing it further. I just don't believe that a guy can go from maybe a second, third round ish, maybe leaks into the first round because the team trades up to get that 5th year kind of option into, he's top 15 draft pick because he threw in his shorts. That's not how scouts work, I don't think. So he has the ability to run, talking about Milroe here, he has the ability to run like Lamar Jackson, who got picked 32nd in his draft. But he has the accuracy of Jalen Hurts, who got picked at pick 53. Back that up, right? Milroe, in his college career, 64.3% completion percentage, Hurts 65.2%. So Milroe a little bit less accurate, but, close enough. There's other factors that would, 1% difference, whatever. Milroe, 879 rushing yards versus Jackson's 1,758. Okay, never mind. Milroe is not the same kind of rusher as Lamar Jackson is. He doesn't even have the same amount of rushing yards that Hurts had. He's got, not even 900. Hurts had over 1,000. I know that. It's going to be very interesting to see where the league ends up landing on Milroe in terms of where he gets drafted. Because we do know that now, more than ever, the league is looking for and valuing these dual threat quarterbacks. Speed at the quarterback position is what we heard that Aaron Glenn specifically stated is what everybody's looking for. Speed at quarterback. Well, here's the guy in this draft that's got the speed at the quarterback position, Jalen Milroe. So, it's not a surprise in that case that this is what teams and scouts are saying. Yeah, he's still our number 3 guy on the board. Right now, I do think that the league ends up being patient enough that Milroe makes it into the second round, given, you look at comps of other guys and you say, okay, he's not quite the runner of these guys. He's the passer of Hurts, and that's not a guarantee to turn around. We know that, we know that the accuracy thing is not a guarantee to be changed. But there's these enticing traits. So will the demand for this type of skill set outweigh the previous precedent set on where other guys who were maybe better prospects than him were drafted later? I don't know. I don't know which one happens, but I do want to point out specifically for Pittsburgh rumors, Jalen Milroe, there's conflicting reports. There's reports going both ways, and so that seems like something like, it's like one of those things where like, yeah, that's what somebody who is interested in Jalen Milroe would say. They would put a conflicting report out there after the first report comes out and say, no, we're not that interested in him. We think other teams like him more than us. I mean, yeah, that's what you would say if you're interested in him, right? So I don't know what to make of those rumors, but I do think second round makes the most sense. Teams be a little bit patient. That for the most part, the NFL is actually, I think, a little too patient with quarterbacks. I say, take a shot. If you are a franchise that doesn't have a quarterback, you're not going anywhere until you get a quarterback. Take some shots on him. But it's a mock draft weekday, and we're going to have a little fun here. I was leaning towards not going Jalen Milroe with this pick. Don't look for this to happen in my 2.0 drop next week. This is not something that I'm saying. I think this is what's going to happen. Those are my more serious mock drafts. The weekly mock drafts that I release, these are a little bit more fun. Still trying to predict things, but, throwing some oddities out there here. We're going to go with Jalen Milroe here in the first round. Like I said, apparently Jackson Dart, first round, top 15 pick. I don't believe it. I have been mocking teams trading up or going whatever, taking them in the first round here at times. I do think it's possible for Jalen Milroe for Jackson Dart. I still tend to lean towards probably in the second round. Just for the record, Jalen Milroe, I have ranked as a third round prospect. But, I'm not somebody who can coach quarterbacks. I don't have any kind of belief in my ability to coach quarterbacks. If I believed I could coach anybody into being accurate 70% of the time, well, I guess I'll take a shot at everything else that Jalen Milroe offers, but history to tell me that I shouldn't have that much confidence in myself. Anyways, Houston's up on the clock next. Last year, I projected Bo Nix to the Broncos. I told you about this earlier. Every single time I picked 12 is Bo Nix. I felt bad, it's boring, whatever, but it's just, sometimes things just line up like that, and it's super freaking obvious, and I thought that was super freaking obvious. I don't believe anybody else would try to argue differently last offseason. Some people did. But pretty much, not literally every single time, but almost literally every single time I did that. This is another one of those where if Emeka Egbuka is available for the Houston Texans at pick 25, I'm probably going to do it every single time unless there's somebody else that I'm really, I push down the board and it's like, well, okay, they would take that over Emeka Egbuka. But I think pretty highly of Emeka Egbuka. I like him a lot. He is my 17th ranked prospect right now on my big board. And it just makes too much sense to Houston if he's available here. Los Angeles Rams, wide receiver, cornerback, offensive line. Those are all needs that the Rams have. And they do not have a second round pick. Their next pick is going to be pick 90. If I'm the Rams, I'm calling Buffalo. And I'm checking to see if they want to move up with picks 56 and 62. They can keep that pick 30 that we see down here on the screen. I don't care. You can keep that. Give me picks 56 and 62. You can come up into the first round, and you can keep that 30th pick. The draft depth lines up so that the Rams really should not miss out on much in doing this, what I'm about to do. Of course, the same could basically be said for the Bills. The talent's going to be the same for them. They have some of the similar needs. This is a deep draft class in some of those areas, especially around that area of the draft. Maybe Buffalo doesn't want to give up those picks, but we're going to say that they're okay doing it because these two organizations are in different spots. Buffalo's, I think, a little bit closer than the Los Angeles Rams to being a Super Bowl contender, and Buffalo is like they're making it happen. The Los Angeles Rams, once again, they're kind of in between two worlds where they're kind of rebuilding while maintaining this Super Bowl potential. And one team could be a little bit more hungry to just get those last few pieces to get them over the, whatever. I can't think of the saying. My brain is melted at this point, but you get the point. Maybe the Bills wouldn't want to do this draft trade for the reason that the same reason that the Los Angeles Rams do want to make this draft trade. So I look at the board and I look at the needs for the Buffalo Bills, and there's got to be somebody that they're going to say, okay, probably not going to be there at pick 30. We do like 2 picks up here. We're willing to make this happen. Let's make the trade happen, and then I'll reveal who that is. So you can take some guesses and maybe make it down in the comments. Who do you think it's going to be for the Buffalo Bills here? Who am I trading up for them? That we don't think will make it to pick 30. So, Buffalo Bills, we said we just want picks 56, 50, 62. We're going to need a little future. I originally did third. draft didn't quite like that. So, let's see, watch this. Let's see. 83% this time around. So it didn't like it the last time I did it. To me, the math actually worked out to this, but let's just do this anyways. It's close enough either way. It doesn't actually matter right now. The main idea is that the Los Angeles Rams are going to move back into the second round. Now, don't worry, Rams fans. You made it this far. I don't want to leave you out drying here. So I imagine what could happen with those picks. Best case scenario here, maybe, is in my opinion, is we're going to get Jack Besh, who I think that they really would like a lot, the Rams, and Charles Grant, offensive lineman, somebody who is getting actually some like first round buzz now. I don't know about that. I don't know not about that. I just I don't know if that will remain or not as something, but nonetheless, I have as my 59th highest prospect on my top 65 board, and then Jack Besh is my 47th prospect on that board. I like them both quite a bit. And so we pushed that trade through Buffalo. Who was it? Probably won't make it there. It is going to be... Is he on here? Yeah. Matthew Golden could be the target here for the Buffalo Bills. And that is with what we're going to do. With 4.39 speed at the combine, Matthew Golden probably assured himself of being a spot in the first round. He is my 22nd ranked prospect. That's going to bring the Baltimore Ravens up onto the clock. Head coach John Harbaugh watched the tackles and the guards first as he began his studies of this draft class, and he said that he likes a lot of those guys. And he also said that they're hopeful to retain Ronnie Staley. Well, hopeful is a pretty strong word, meaning we'll see. And watching the tackles and the guards first tells you, I think, most likely tells you what they feel is their biggest need. Otherwise, why are you watching them first? Maybe it's part of his process. Maybe he always watches tackles and guards first. I don't know, but I think I'm taking that as a bit of a hint as to what they feel that they're going to need the most in this draft. And whether you get Ronnie Staley or not, this pick will shift just a little bit. It's going to stick to offensive line either way. So, as it happens with teams like the Ravens all the time, remaining patient here, it pays off nicely. I'm going to have them take Josh Connerly, offensive tackle, to add to their room, assuming that they do not end up retaining Ronnie Staley and then he goes somewhere else. Obviously, they're going to try to. It's no guarantee. If they do retain the likes of Ronnie Staley, Tyler Booker could also instead be of high interest here, among other guys, of course. Did I mention Josh Connerly, my 26th ranked prospect, brings us to the Detroit Lions up on the clock. And I think that it's a little tough to trust that the next group of cornerbacks will fall to the Detroit Lions at the end of the second round, this late in the second round. So we're going to play the board strategically, and it may make sense for Detroit to get ahead of the next run of cornerbacks, even if it means they're maybe taking a guy a little bit higher than the consensus board or whatnot on them. I like Trey Amos myself, but I'm hearing that the league really is not in on him as a top 50 guy even. I'm not sure why they aren't, but he does have some major athletic concerns, so that's probably why they aren't. I think that he might be this year's Kamari Lassiter, the Kamari Lassiter of this year's draft, so to speak. Unexciting, but rock solid. Kamari Lassiter had a really solid first year. The ceiling maybe isn't as high as you'd wish, but man, I like Trey Amos a lot. But it doesn't sound like the league is in on him for the first round at least, so we're not going to do that. Of the remaining names, I think that Azariah Thomas fits the Dan Campbell Azariah Thomas fits the Dan Campbell mold the best. He didn't really do any athletic testing. He's not a super athlete. We already know that about him. I don't think that his stock went up or down at the combine, which is fine for a guy who's expected to go late first, early second anyways. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to draft Azariah Thomas to the Detroit Lions. I always have to make sure that I say it correctly. Let's bring Washington up onto the board next. Azariah, by the way, my 32nd prospect on my big board. Washington, they traded a 5th round pick to acquire Deebo Samuel over the weekend, if you did not hear about that. There you go, now you have. I might have gone with Luther Burden if it wasn't for that, but now we've got that settled. There's too much crossover. They can still use some wide receiver help, but too much crossover between Luther Burden and Deebo Samuel. So, it is between guard, Tyler Booker, or Donovan Jackson. We'll get into why I'm going to list 2 names there as a possibility, and edge rusher Donovan Ezeragu at this pick. I look at my top 65 draft board, and I say that I could probably get one of either with my next pick. One of these either of these positions, there's going to be some nice talent that will be draftable at the point in time where my next pick comes up. And there's another really good crop of offensive linemen that's just behind that as well. If I happen to miss out there and be misjudge the board a little bit, or maybe the guys that I like in that group happen to get taken, and now I got to go elsewhere. So there's another group too at the offensive line behind that. Keep that in mind. Unfortunately, I didn't get any good notes from the press conference to help guide this pick either. So let's talk about Tyler Booker or Donovan Jackson. But the pick, Tyler Booker, stock down? Question mark. Let's answer that. So it's not a surprise that Tyler Booker is not a good athlete. That's not surprising. So we don't want to ding him twice for that. But he is poor enough of an athlete that there are major concerns to be had there. I still have a second-round draft grade on him. The question is, did this hurt his stock in the eyes of the scouts that have been telling media personalities that have been doing these mock drafts that he's going to be going in the top 15 picks? I assume it does. I don't think that they were assuming he was this poor of an athlete. The other possibility, of course, would be like he just had a poor workout. That happens sometimes. I mean, that happened this weekend to the tight ends. Gunnar Helm, poor guy, was playing on a twisted ankle, working out on a twisted ankle from the moment he started almost. It happens on like the first thing that he does on the field workouts. Majorly twisted, and it had a terrible workout, looked unathletic, and this was a guy who we thought was athletic, and like I immediately moved him down my draft board. I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. He did so bad. What the heck did I see on film? And yeah, come to find out, okay, there we go. So he's not as bad as that is. So the things happen, bad workouts happen. Maybe there's an excuse for these numbers, but he had the second lowest 40 time of all the offensive linemen in the entire group this year. By far, he had the lowest 10-yard split in this group at 1.96 seconds. To give you an idea, the second lowest split was 1.9, and they do get 2 opportunities to run this, so it's not like, you know, in case you slip on the first one, you get a chance to fix it. Apparently, he wasn't able to fix it. And he was the only offensive lineman to not clear 8 feet, which is low anyways, in the broad jump. Like, extremely poor broad jump. His athletic testing was really poor overall here, but he had a 4.1 RAS score. That would put him at the guard prospect number 933 out of 1,592 people since 1987 that those metrics are measured, that RAS score from Ken Platt. All in all, that puts him just in a below average category. It's not like, oh my gosh, this guy's so unathletic, it's terrible. He had some bad numbers, but he also had some other numbers, and then you have to take into account the guy's size. I think that his 3-cone and his shuttle are really what saved his athletic profile. For his size, those numbers were average for me. And those are the most heavily weighted athletic measures for guards, for me, in my system. So I can only assume that to some extent that might be true of Ken Platt's RAS score. I do my own RAS score. I'll show you what I'm talking about at the end of this video when I show you the data that I've collected from the draft that you can get up on the Discord server at the end of this video. In short, I created my own RAS system a few years ago when I started doing this, before I even knew that there was an RAS score, or I knew that was a thing. And I continue to hone and check in and test that and improve it every year, my own system. I'm working with 4 years of data. You know, his goes back all the way back to like 1987. Bit of a difference, but I have been checking this year. I've been checking my scores up against Ken Platt's. I should say, I've been checking the results. Most of the time, pretty much in agreement on the RAS score. To me, it's really important to measure athletics within, both are important, pure athletics, but it's also, and I think it depends maybe on the position a little bit, is what I'm finding out, important to keep in mind, given their size, this is how athletic they are. Because, you know, getting hit at 100 miles per hour by a mosquito is a little bit different than getting hit at 100 miles per hour by a bulldozer, right? 2 different things are going to happen to your body in those situations. So the relative mass of these players is relative to their athletics. All right? So that's why I started measuring it, because I didn't know that, oh yeah, other people figured that out. I mean, obviously they did. Whatever, I like to create my own things. Donovan Ezraku. That's the other prospect we're looking at here. Donovan had a solid combine. He really just went out and showed that what you see on tape is real in both his athletic testing and during the on-field drill workout. He is ultra quick and agile. His testing backs that up. In fact, for my athletic scoring, both himself and James Pierce have incomplete scores, but Donovan has a 3.7 and James Pierce has a 3.8. So my system starts at a 4, goes up to a 7, or down to a 1. So it's a 1 through 7 scoring athletic and physical system. I have all of my systems on that scale. And lower is better, so 3.7 is better than 3.8. Once again, both of them working with incomplete profiles there. But nonetheless, something to think about, because if you are tuned in to the draft, Pierce ran an excellent 40. That's the most popular event. It's the one that gets a lot of notoriety. He killed it, so everyone was raving about that. But meanwhile, scouts were looking at what Ezraku was doing and saying, hey, this is pretty darn good itself. So Donovan Ezraku had a nice, solid draft weekend. Might have raised his draft stock, I don't know, but he definitely justified anybody thinking that he's a borderline first round, second round kind of guy, I would say. So Donovan Ezraku, he is my draft prospect number 33 in this draft class, and that is where we're going to go. We are going to go with that over Tyler Booker. So, Buffalo Bills up on the clock here for the second time in this mock draft. Pick 26, they go Matthew Golden. Pick 30, let's see. I still have Princely and Jack Sawyer as borderline first-round talents, but I know that the league does not agree with that for Jack Sawyer, and so far it does not seem like the league agrees with that for Princely Umanmielen either. I think that Benjamin Morrison is a nice scheme fit for the zone-heavy Buffalo Bills defense. Hopefully, some medical information on him will start to leak out in the coming days, weeks, so that we can better pin down his draft stock. But for now, he is my 29th ranked prospect with a big asterisk next to that, kind of waiting on further news. But until then, that's kind of where I'm going to keep him. And that's going to bring Kansas City up onto the board here, pick 31. And General Manager Brett Veach said that they're going to focus on the offensive and defensive line, just like they do every year. Just like every team has done since the beginning of time. Nothing has changed because of how the Super Bowl turned out. Sometimes you just don't, there's only so many offensive and defensive linemen to go around. And some teams do a better job of choosing which ones they want and whatever, creating these offensive and defensive lines. But nonetheless, Kansas City definitely has some needs on offensive and defensive line that they want to fill. They're looking to get Hollywood back on the team, Hollywood Brown, back in free agency, so that could eliminate the need for a wide receiver here. Brett also said that this is a deep running back class. Otherwise, he said that the talent is along the defensive line, the corners, and there's a solid linebacker group. So he didn't quite bring up the offensive line in that, otherwise where the talent is. And he also mentioned that he believes that running backs tend to fall position-wise, and that's how you find good talent late. So this is what we can deduce from this stuff from Brett Veach. Number one, running back in the first round is going to be off the table. They're going to wait and let the talent fall to them. And technically, you could say that Omarion Hampton has fallen here to Kansas City, so maybe, but we're going to take them off the table there based on what he said. Number two, wide receiver may not be a need by draft day. Number three, offensive line and defensive line are always important in the draft. 3B, but the defensive line has good depth, so you can probably hold off on grabbing that right here. We can get that a little bit later. We didn't say anything about the offensive line depth. That's definitely a need here. So I agree with Veach on that linebacker group that he said. What did he say? It said it's a solid linebacker group. Yeah, I agree with that. The question is where do they actually value them? Do they think one of them might be worth taking around here or not? To me, this is a top-heavy linebacker group. One of them is already gone, and I would not anticipate the next two to make it to the end of the second round. And that's really our first group of linebackers, and then there's a drop-off there. I think that the bulk of the decent talent exists late round 3 into the 4th round, that second group of talent. And then there's going to be a big drop-off from there. Whereas there's a lot of offensive line depth on day 2. So to me, you look at what they have, and the Kansas City Chiefs have picks 63 and 66. And that makes this a no-brainer to me. We're going to take a linebacker here, and then we're going to take offensive line and defensive line with picks 63 and 66 because we know that the depth in this draft is going to leave us with some guys there to choose from, almost certainly, and we should like what we have there. If not, I guess we trade back, and then get into the next tier or whatever. But nonetheless, Colston Loveland is also somebody that they could always draft here if he's available. Always an interesting pick. I'm going to go with Carson Schweschinger. He is my 27th ranked prospect UCLA linebacker here. Was my number one linebacker, but Jahad Campbell did end up jumping that. Philadelphia up on the clock here with pick 32. Best player available on my board is Omarion Hampton. We talked about, maybe I've talked about this. Maybe that was in the video that was going to be released here. But I do like Philly to take a running back at some point, probably in the draft. Probably not the first round. Second best player available is going to be Derek Harmon. And he fits one of the bigger needs as well for this team. Derek Harmon has plus physical traits with his arm length and his wingspan, and he ran the 40, showing that he has solid athleticism for his size. Additionally, in the on-field drills, he looked exceptional in the run the hoop drill, also known as a figure eight drill, which shows really good agility and body control, I think, while being highly representative of the types of movement that is asked of defensive linemen on most plays in a game. So you get the most real, view of what these guys can look like on the field in that drill. I really like that drill quite a bit. So we're going to go Derek Harmon here. He is my 24th ranked prospect. Anyways, notable names that were left out of here in top first round: Omarion Hampton, of course, Luther Burden, obviously, Josh Simmons, big name there, not taken there. I will say for Josh Simmons, there was good news out actually about his injury, so that's good. Colston Loveland, Donovan Jackson, James Pierce, of course, we talked about that, and then that's it. Those are the guys who a lot of times do go in the first round in other mock drafts. So there you go. Thank you very much. Over to me. All right, so I just did a recording of this, kind of a rough copy. It ended up being too long, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but here is the combine data nicely put out for you. Before actually we get into this, I do want to say about the mock draft that I did, don't take the actual picks too seriously. The main idea was to get out there all the information, or some of the information that I had gathered throughout the combine in order to let you know on them, give you some of my thoughts on some of the things, some of the rumors that are going about. Did I think that the stock was up or down for some of those players, etc.? That was the most important part of that draft. I will say the one bit of information that I'm having the most maybe regret about attacking as aggressively as I did in terms of taking it for real would be the Jalen Milroe information. I am seeing some smoldering smoke from different sources on, hey, don't necessarily count him out of the race for quarterback 3, but the fire is not burning as much as I had initially gathered from the one source that I kind of took for Bible, maybe, when I ended up making that decision. And I don't regret it necessarily, but when I ended up making that decision with Pittsburgh, drafting Milroe there, that was kind of something that, we're going to anticipate. I'm less so, okay, that's something we need to anticipate for happening. It could be both Jackson Dart and him coming into the first round. Could, like I said in the video, could be the second round. But this information is up on the Discord server, as I have said before. I believe you should be able to download it then, and you can play with it yourself. If you like tall edge rushers, there you go. You can find out which edge rushers have elite height for their position. That's right down here, you can see. Some of these oddities here are because the sheet looks much different on my end. I just reduced this for better visuals for you. So everything's in inches because I reduced it down to inches. So you probably don't really need this key, but hey, it doesn't hurt. And then there's 3 averages just because of how I have my data gotten out to determine this. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The color coding here, good to bad. And once you organize it, you can really see it. So that is the nice thing about this data chart. This is the main thing for you. I am leaving on the athletic numbers, so I do want to just let you know quickly. This is a pounds per inch number, and then I take the athletic numbers and run them through this number to get a new number. And the long story short, in 2 parts, is that, first of all, I have 4 years of data for this. In some parts, I like that that it's a limited, more modern set of data, but it's also a limited set of data. So just keep that in mind for some of these, elite numbers. They're every year still changing a little bit. But also, when it comes to this athletic testing information over here, the main thing that I have found for the edge position specifically right here, and I'm sure to some extent it would count for other positions, is, we'll just take the 40-yard time here, is that if you are in average, what could be highlighted in yellow, I just leave white because it actually just looks better like that, or above, you're good. It doesn't need to be into this elite number for you to be a fantastic player, but it's kind of an eliminator. Really, once you get into, let's just go to the vert. This is the highest correlation to success at the position from what I can figure out. But these numbers right here, the red and the gray over here, that's like your eliminators. That's when you actually are really concerned about that player and their ability to succeed at the next level. There's really no names that pop out. For instance, at the vert in those, the best names that pop out of 15 players from the past were Lucas Van Ness, who hasn't turned out very well, Elijah Roberts, Logan Hall, Sean Martin, along with Thomas Incoon, if you remember him, Trey Williams, Tyrese Wheat, were other guys who tested in the vert very poorly for their size. So that is the quick of it, and once again, this is the primary stuff, because you really got to think. Once you get over here, you got to think, these numbers too, the height and the weight, just because it's an elite number doesn't necessarily mean that that's good for the position. For instance, wide receivers, you start to get diminishing returns. It starts to be a negative once you get past 6'3.5" or so in terms of player success. The best players in history usually are between 6'1" to 6'3" is the most common. So that's once again where you come into being average in this testing is not bad at all. It's not just an average thing. It doesn't count against them if you are measuring into the average numbers. That's in fact probably a good thing a lot of the time. So just keep that in mind, and it of course does depend on the position. For instance, wide receivers, they come in all different shapes and sizes and can succeed. Yeah, I said most of them come 6'1" to 6'3". That's still a pretty big range there. And even within that range, you get some guys who are slot receivers, you get some guys who are X's, some guys who are Z's, all within that range, and some guys who are heavy, some guys who are light. There's just so many different profiles, especially at the wide receiver position, but at all these positions. Don't lock it in too much, especially for these numbers, those are good. Those numbers you want to see, blue, green, start to get concerning when you see these smaller, especially for the arm length wingspan here. But I will be as soon as possible, I will be putting all of this information up on to the Discord server. It may not be there immediately, maybe not every position will be there as I start to get them up there. So thank you very, very much. Peace out.